Welcome to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com, especially the PEMF machine, which will help you as an athlete or as a weekend warrior recover quicker from any injuries you have. I don't know why Sam's smiling and the fact that he's young enough he doesn't have injuries, but help me welcome to the show. I'm your co-host, Mike Goodpaster. Help me welcome in Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right. And today we're going to finish up the AFC North. We'll have done, I think, all four teams after this, and we're going to discuss the Baltimore Ravens, who I think it's safe to say that they are one of the two favorites in the AFC headed into this 2020 season, Sam.
Yeah, it's got to be them and the Kansas City Chiefs. I think in terms of just how proven the rosters are, because they both had success this past year. And then in terms of just pure talent, I think those two are maybe the most talented rosters in the entire AFC. I would throw teams like the Broncos and potentially even the Chargers up there, but I don't think they're as proven. They've had difficulties in the past. There's a lot of questions at quarterbacks for both those teams as well.
All right, now last year they started off the season 2-2. We talked yesterday about the Week 4 blowout loss to Cleveland, and then they win 12 straight games. They come up short first playoff game against the Tennessee Titans. Lamar Jackson won the MVP. He was the first Raven to claim the award and the first Baltimore quarterback to do it since the Baltimore Colts' Burt Jones in 1976. So when we look at this coming in, the questions just have to be Lamar Jackson has performed well in the regular season, but the postseason he's come up short big time.
Yeah, I have to wonder if he's going to get that fixed or not. We saw a guy like Patrick Mahomes during his first 4 years of start. He came out, he played well in the playoffs. And I think I still stand by the fact that the Chiefs would have been to the Super Bowl and played the Rams had Kareem Hunt not been an idiot and not got himself suspended and basically kicked off the team. If he hadn't done that, I think the Chiefs would have beat the Patriots and made the Super Bowl. That wasn't what happened, though. But Mahomes played well during the postseason, and Lamar Jackson this past year really didn't. He had an average game. I won't say he played horribly, but the Ravens kind of got shut out. I mean, the Ravens, for the most part, got shut out. It was 12-28. Tennessee ran all over them, and Lamar Jackson got held in check, basically.
Yeah, we'll start off at the top, which is head coach John Harbaugh, which I think outside of Bill Belichick, I think Harbaugh's the best coach in the NFL. And I think the big reason that's because he's willing to adapt the style of his players rather than the other way around. And the thing about him, and we talk about Lamar Jackson, I think Lamar Jackson has some shortcomings as a quarterback. And I think Lamar Jackson, just like Patrick Mahomes going to Kansas City, Lamar Jackson fits this offense perfectly. And it's basically because you got a coach in John Harbaugh that has designed this offense to fit perfectly around Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I'll say John Harbaugh is the top 3 coach in the NFL. And it's not just him, it's also offensive coordinator Greg Roman. They've really done a job here fitting this offense to Lamar Jackson, putting the pieces around him to help him be successful. And they're letting him play his style of football. They're not trying to make him something he isn't. They're letting him go out there, play sort of like he did in college. And they're also trying to put weapons around him, also at receiver spot, definitely at running back and on the offensive line, to protect him and help him flourish in the kind of style he wants to play.
Yeah, and I think the hiring of Greg Roman was the first great move heading into the 2019 season because you had Greg Roman with Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco. They had a lot of success designing plays around Colin Kaepernick and his strengths. So I think that was the first great move by Harbaugh. But I mean, to me, Harbaugh's up there with Belichick. Those are the top 2 coaches in this league, and I think that is unquestioned.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think at this point, Harbaugh has to be in that conversation. And I think one more Super Bowl title would put him in the Hall of Fame conversation. I'm that high on John Harbaugh. I think he's that kind of coach who could be a Hall of Famer, but I think he does need another Super Bowl title if he wants to get there.
Is Andy Reid a Super Bowl, or is he a Hall of Fame coach?
I see where you're going with this. I think Andy Reid is probably going to be a Hall of Fame coach, yes, and he only has 1 Super Bowl title. He's been there a couple times. So I think he's got. Let me put it this way: if John Harbaugh serves in the head coaching role for, let's say, 6 or 7 more years, just accumulates more mass wins, even if he doesn't win their Super Bowl, I think he'll get in the Hall of Fame. Let's take a step back. I agree with you. I think he'll be a Hall of Fame coach when he.
Yeah, I think he's a Hall of Fame. Tony Dungy's a Hall of Fame coach, and if Tony Dungy's a Hall of Fame coach, I mean, Harbaugh should have been there already, even though he's still coaching. When we look at this, Lamar Jackson, 19-3 over 2 seasons, including 13-2 last year. The scary part is he's only 23 years old, And I think a lot of this has got to do with how much he can advance his game, because there are some issues, especially in the pocket, throwing the ball, especially on the shorter routes. If he can fix that, he's going to be up there with Patrick Mahomes. But I think that's still a big question to me, Sam.
It is. I think there's a lot of refinement questions with him. He did lead the NFL with 36 touchdowns this past year. He threw deep balls surprisingly well in my eyes. I think he struggled that even at the NFL Combine. You can go back and watch him how he threw at the Combine. He overthrew and underthrew guys a couple times, and that was just against air. So I was really worried about him and his deep passes coming into the NFL. He actually outperformed my expectations in that category this past year. But I agree with you. I think, and we see sometimes a similar thing with Patrick Mahomes. It's just the shorter passes, the shorter routes. They're not really fine-tuned to those kind of things. They like to throw the ball deep. They've got big arms. They tend to miss those shorter routes for some reason. The timing's not right there, and they tend to just overthrow it.
Yeah, and I think the breakout star here that could really help him come around is Marquise Brown. Brown announced his presence by catching an 83-yard touchdown pass from Jackson in Week 1 in Miami. Of course, I think every pass thrown in that game was a touchdown against Miami. But when you look at him, I think Marquise Brown is huge. And if he turns into that number one receiver, I think that would help this offense immensely, especially with the run game they've already got.
Well, yeah, that's what they're buying into. That's why they took him 25th overall pick in 2019. And there were some concerns. There were some injury issues during his rookie year. He only played in 14 games. He only had 11 starts. So he was never really fully healthy. I don't think a shortened offseason is going to help him, but I think being in his second year is going to show they made some progress. This is a guy who's got good speed. He's very elusive. I think he'll be a good deep threat for Lamar Jackson. And I think this is probably their best receiving option right now outside of tight end Mark Andrews. I know they've added a couple of rookie receivers in this past draft, but I think Marquise Brown has to be the big guy.
Yeah, and then, of course, you had the Jacksonville Jaguars who decided to contribute Calais Campbell to the defense for the Baltimore Ravens for basically a fifth-round pick. And that, is mind-boggling to me. The Jaguars give that up that easily. And to add this to the Ravens defense, I think is huge. This is a Ravens defense that defensive line-wise, at least in the playoffs, they did have a hard time stopping the run. But Calais Campbell's a huge addition to this team.
Yeah, this is kind of stuff that just infuriates me as a Steelers fan. Whenever I see the Baltimore Ravens go out there and get players like this caliber for discount prices, stuff like that, it just makes me so mad. Because there's no reason that if you're Jacksonville, I understand you're trying to offload a bunch of veteran contracts. But you gave up Calais Campbell way too easily, and to give him up to a wrong team. This is a guy who...
It's the wrong team to use, Sam.
Well, yeah, that's true. Maybe to some people it's the right team, but I think to most people it's the wrong team. But I think Campbell is a guy who will make a huge difference. I know he only had 6.5 sacks this past year. I think he'll do better this year. He's one of the best run stoppers in the game today. And really over the past 5 or 6 years, he's been one of the best defensive ends in the NFL. So you get I know he's aging, but you get one of the best run defenders in the league. And you add that to a defensive that's already been strong.
I think the other thing you get is I think his impact in the locker room for the Ravens will be immeasurable. I think he is, from everything I've read, he is a great guy. He's a great teammate. He's the kind of guy you want to add to your team whenever you can, Sam. Yeah,
this is a former Walter Payton Man of the Year winner. This is a guy who is a leader. He's a great character. And you put him in a locker room that's full of a bunch of young guys. Let's be honest, even though guys like Matt Judon have been in the league a couple of years, they're still relatively young. Defensively, you add guys like Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison. Those guys are rookies. And even players like Marcus Peters, they have sometimes had attitude issues in the past. So bringing in a guy like Calais Campbell will hopefully help stabilize everything.
Yeah, and I think the big question here is what happens when the Ravens fall behind? Because that seems to be, that was the MO in the playoff games the last 2 years. And when teams jump ahead of them, they struggle to be able to come back. And when you look at that, the postseason passer rating again, 68 for Lamar Jackson. So I would think the key here is you'd be able to run the ball, maybe get up a touchdown or two, and then hope the Ravens panic and start throwing the ball. But that's not going to happen until the second half with this team because Harbaugh's not going to bail on it that quickly. But still, is this a team that can come from behind if they get down a couple touchdowns and you have to have Lamar Jackson make the throws?
We saw they had an opportunity to do this against the Kansas City Chiefs early in the season. They ended up losing the game. Kansas City was up 23-6 at halftime. And Baltimore comes back, makes it a 28-33 game at the end. So they got closer. I just don't know if they're going to be a team that's going to be able to overcome that in high-pressure moments. Like you said, I know John Harbaugh is a great coach. I just don't know personnel-wise if Lamar Jackson has the level of maturity yet. I think he'll be getting there. They hope he's getting there, but really right now, I would bet against the Baltimore Ravens being comeback warriors when they get down by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, because still the wide receivers, I know I talked about Marquise Brown. We all know I like him. I really like Devin Duvernay, a speedster out of Texas, who, like Brown, can really stretch the field. But the thing the Ravens are missing here is a chain-moving receiver who can catch those intermediate passes to make life easier on Lamar.
Yeah, they really don't have it. They got a lot of deep route runners. I mean, you got Mark Andrews, who's going to be basically your security blanket. But if you can knock him out of the game, I mean, they really don't have anyone you can go underneath with. I mean, you got who else your receivers? You got Willie Snead. I don't really think you're going to be using him underneath that much. So to me, I think they don't have a full complement of players who are out there helping. They don't even really have a great receiving back right now. So it's not like you have an Austin Eckler or a James White to help you move the chains either. You don't have that go-to guy on your roster.
Yeah, and I think the other question is on the offensive line. You lost probably a future Hall of Famer in guard Marshall Yonda. He's going to be replaced probably by Ben Powers. But the offensive line, especially with a team that wants to run the ball first or on damn near every play, it's really huge to be able to block for those running backs. It's huge to be able to give Lamar time in the pocket to be comfortable. Losing Marshall Yonda is a huge loss, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be bigger. This is almost on the level of Travis Frederick retiring for Dallas. I think it's right around that area. Because Yonda was a player, I know he was getting up there in age. He was already, I think, 35 years old. But he was still a second-team All-Pro this past season. He was still a very productive player on the offensive line. And he's still one of the top 5 guards in the NFL. So losing a guy like that is definitely going to have an impact on you. I don't think there's any way it couldn't impact you. So I do think they have some guys there who are good possible replacements. Ben Powers is one. DJ Fluker, who was starting in Seattle this past year. They have guys out there who are good run blockers. I just don't know if you're ever going to have a guy as good as Marshall Yonda again.
All right, also on offense, I think people are overthinking this. How will you work J.K. Dobbins into the mix? Again, I mean, this probably stems from the fact that, a lot of those people dabble in fantasy football. But to me, you can never have it, especially on an offense like this. You can't have enough running backs.
Well, yeah, let alone if someone gets hurt. I mean, we already have a shortened offseason. You don't know how that's going to impact guys in their health. We've already seen plenty of guys go down in training camp. We're only about a week or 2 in. So I think having a guy like J.K. Dobbins for depth is amazing. I think you're going to give him snaps, maybe not in the early weeks because he's a rookie. It has been a shortened training camp. But I think you'll see this guy before the end of the season. He'll start getting 5 to 10 carries a game, especially because they're running the ball so much. I think talent establishes itself. You're going to see him potentially jump Gus Edwards on the depth chart. And you'll see J.K. Dobbins before the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you can never have enough quality wide receivers just because of the style of offense you play.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no problem with having too many guys. I mean, that's a good problem to have. So I would work J.K. Dobbins in as soon as you feel like he's ready.
Now, if we're going to look at defense, we've already talked about Calais Campbell and how that makes the defensive line better. But how do they find all these linebackers? They get Patrick Queen at number 28 overall, Sam, and the rich just keep getting richer on this. And they still were able to get J.K. Dobbins with the second round.
Yeah, I don't know how. When we were doing the live draft show, I was so upset when Patrick Queen continued falling because I knew exactly what was going to happen as soon as I saw him go down and Baltimore came up on the board. I'm like, oh, this is really going to happen. They're going to find the replacement for C.J. Mosley, and they did. And they ended up getting Patrick Queen, and they ended up getting Malik Harrison a few rounds later. And now, lo and behold, they went from needing 2 starting linebackers. Suddenly they have 2 guys. And I've got guys like L.J. Fort and Tyus Bowser are backup linebackers now. So they just find guys. This is a great organization. They've been a great organization for the past 10, 12 years. And they just masterfully handled the draft.
All right. So the big question here, we talked about.
Yeah, and I believe Mike has just got kicked again. This is the second time it's happened to him in 2 days, probably because there's storms out there. But I don't know what he was going to ask me quite yet, so that's kind of disappointing. But at the same time, I feel like there's so much talent on his defense. The one issue is potentially how the rookie linebackers are going to perform, specifically Patrick Queen, Mike Harrison, like I've talked about in the past. There is depth there in L.J. Fort and Chris Board. Tyus Bowser is behind Matt Judon. So there is depth at linebacker for Baltimore. There's also a good number of pass rushers. We already talked about Calais Campbell. Derek Wolf's coming off a year where he set his career high in sacks. You got Pernell McPhee's coming back. You got Jalen Ferguson. I think this is his second year. So you've got pass rushers up front too. It's a worrisome combination to have those kind of guys on a defensive front.
All right. Did you get my question?
No, I didn't get your question. What was it?
All right. My question is this. In Baltimore, last year's playoff loss, I think, was the worst they had taken since Super Bowl III, even though it was a different organization. Will they be able to overcome that? Because the year before that, I think they lost at home in the playoffs to the Chargers. Those are two games that I think people expected them to win. I mean, when does this start to become a concern?
Yeah, well, it starts to become a concern after this year because it starts speaking to the level of maturity of your team and whether or not you're going to be able to achieve any substantial playoff success. Once you get in a rut, even with guys like Lamar Jackson, you kind of get stuck there. So I think John Harbaugh and his team have to be kind of going out there on the revenge tour this year, talking about how we're going to perform once we get to the playoffs. So this is a concern for me: is how will they manage the last couple of years? How will they manage the last couple of losses? I'm worried it's going to affect Lamar Jackson's psyche. But if he comes out there and plays solid, then you just get over it and keep moving on.
All right. So did the Ravens win this division?
Yeah, I think they do. I don't think it'll be as clear cut as some people are saying. I think Pittsburgh will get a game from them. I think either Cincinnati or Cleveland will take a game from them as well. So I think they'll go 4-2. But I still think they're going to win the division.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Baltimore Ravens, I think that there's no doubt they're the most complete team because I don't think the Steelers are going to be able to run the ball. Their defense is going to be great. Not convinced about the wide receivers, even though maybe depth-wise they're just as good as Baltimore. And you got an old Big Ben. The Bengals, they've got a bad coaching staff. The Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browns. I really think it's possible that this division could come down to Baltimore or Cleveland. I know you hate to hear that.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to hear that, but I mean, in terms of talent, you're probably right. If we're talking about the two most complete rosters in the division, it's probably those two, because the Cleveland Browns have so much offensively, they could probably match the firepower that Baltimore has. I think you even can say Cleveland has a better running game potentially if they get Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both working together. So they have a very good depth chart. They have a great team. It's just a big question of can the coaching staff get guys like Baker Mayfield to have their heads on straight.
All right. So any other NFL news you want to talk about? I did hear that it looks like Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to beat out Tua for the quarterbacking job, at least for week 1 in Miami.
Yeah, that's not entirely surprising because Tua has missed some time towards the end of his college season, and I fully expect Joe Burrow to start week 1. I thought Tua, because they have a established backup there who won a couple games from this past season, I thought he would probably sit for at least week 1 or week 2, just because they haven't had any preseason games. It's a shortened training camp and all that stuff. So this isn't surprising to me. I think we'll see Tua probably by week 4, week 5.
All right. So my thing on this is this, though. I think the difference between Miami and Cincinnati, you got Ryan Finley, who 0-6 last year as a starter. With Miami, I mean, it's possible that, Ryan Fitzpatrick's just better than Tua right now just because you said shortened training camp. He's played in the NFL. He has had success. So I think it's a lot easier if you're Miami to just go ahead and start the veteran than it would be if you're Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah, you're Cincinnati. There's no question you don't want to put Ryan Finley out there because I think Joe Burrow is arguably already better than Ryan Finley. So that probably isn't the situation in Miami.
Joe Burrow was better than Ryan Finley probably right after he came out of his mom's womb.
Joe Burrow was better than Ryan Finley last year. So, I mean, it's going to be – I think I understand why Miami's making a decision. They're deciding to put Fitzpatrick out there. It makes total sense to me. And, again, it would make total sense to me when Cincinnati decides to play Joe Burrow week 1.
So what's your take on Damian Williams opting out for the 2020 season? I think this means we're going to see a lot more Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, it definitely will. I think this is a tough situation maybe for Kansas City, though, because they probably didn't expect to have to give Clyde Edwards-Helaire the starting job in week 1. This is now what they're going to have to do. I expect they were probably going to start playing him more towards the end of the season. They were going to keep Damian Williams as a starter early on in the year for all the reasons we've already mentioned: short training camp, no preseason games. But now you're throwing him there week 1. I think there'll be some mistakes. There'll be some growing pains for him. But, I mean, trial by fire is sometimes the best way for guys.
Yes. All right. I think the Baltimore Ravens will win the AFC North. I figured I'd bring that up. I think it'll be more of an 11-5, 12-4. I still don't think they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but maybe Lamar Jackson improves and that changes. What's our topic tomorrow, Sam, at 1 o'clock?
Yeah, tomorrow we're going to talk about the top 10 players who are not in the Hall of Fame, so 10 players who have been eligible and just have not gotten in. We know there's a good list of guys, and your boy Ken Anderson's definitely going to be on there, so we'll get that tomorrow at 1.
Oh, as a Bengals fan, there's a lot of guys that should be in that aren't. Kenny Riley should be in.
Yeah,
Lamar Perry should be in. Kenny Anderson should be in. And I would make a case for Reggie Williams, too. It was one of the most consistent linebackers for almost 2 decades in the NFL.
Well, considering how many guys they've led recently, I think you can make a case for plenty of players.
Yeah, plus Reggie just recently sent me his new book to read like 3 weeks before it came out, so I like him anyways. But, all right, Sam, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Sam_Teets33. Constantly posting new sports content out there every day, so feel free to go check those places out.
All right, remember to check out RCANDT for Replenishing Care and Technologies, the presenting sponsor of the NFL show. Me and Sam will be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow, which you can watch live on Facebook, Twitch, Periscope, YouTube. I think there's a few other places, but I can't remember what they were. And also, you can hear our podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.